colleagues, joins me now Senator Ed Markey of the state of Delaware. Senator, have you spoken to Susan Collins or any other Republicans on trying to come up with a bipartisan solution?
Well, right now, this is nothing more, no less than a Republican intramural struggle. They are not actually talking to Democrats right now. They're trying to work out this political unicorn, which they're seeking, amongst the most conservative members of the Republican Senate caucus and the most moderate. And it's a very difficult thing for them, especially since the CBO score has now announced quite clearly the devastating impact which is going to have upon 22 million Americans. It's also, it reported, going to increase premiums and reduce coverage. So that package of problems is something which is going to perplex the Republican leadership for the rest of this week. Very difficult problem to solve.
Senator, I think I may have said Delaware earlier. I meant Massachusetts. I was thinking about Chris Collins, who spoke earlier this morning on Morning Joe about how damaging it's going to be his state. But for you, you've been in Congress for a long time. You know Mitch McConnell. And while we talk about this being an intramural battle between Republicans, you know how skilled he is. Can Mitch McConnell push this thing through?
Well, again, I don't know the answer to that question, but I do know that it's the job of the American people and the Democrats to raise the degree of difficulty for him to be able to accomplish the goal. And the more that we're able to explain how he is going to rip coverage away from people who need opioid addiction treatment, rip coverage away from people who have cancer, who have diabetes, who have heart disease, to make it possible to then package all of the money for a tax break for the wealthiest billionaires in America, is the more difficult his dilemma is going to become. That is going to be our job for the rest of this week. And the more that we have the sunshine as disinfectant on this bill, is the more likely that his logistical difficulties are only going to increase.
All right, well, just for a moment, and I want to choose my words carefully here. Put on your cold, calculating political hat for a moment. Given how damaging this bill is to Medicaid recipients, to your point, to people who are suffering from this opioid crisis, and the extraordinary tax break it gives the rich, if this bill were to pass, would it be a political win for Democrats?
Well, if by that you mean, would this issue then become the biggest issue in the 2018 electoral cycle? The answer is yes. We would basically be taking this issue to the American people as a referendum on whether or not the Republicans deserve to continue to run the House and the Senate. So we don't want to lose this issue. We have fought for a generation to put these health care protections on the books. But if they are successful, if they're able to cobble together a cynical deal that is able to garner them a majority to accomplish this goal, then they are going to pay a huge political price in the 2018 electoral cycle.
Then does it put Democrats in an even more difficult position? Because as someone fighting for people for the state of Massachusetts who got into the business that you're in because you care about the American people, if the bill goes through, you know the millions of people that'll be hurt. But if it doesn't, we remain under Obamacare that is a flawed system and needs help. And the Republicans might not work with you again to help improve Obamacare. So are you put in an almost impossible situation?
No, not at all. In Massachusetts, we now have 98% of our citizens who are covered with health insurance. It's not perfect. We are going to have to continue to try to work to make it even better, to lower premiums and ensure that coverage is better. But it's going to be an infinitely better situation to be in than to have Obamacare eviscerated, which is what the Republicans are trying to do right now. That would send us back to square one. Right now, it's not perfect, but it's a lot better than the day before Obamacare was on the books. We have tens of millions of additional people who have coverage, and that coverage is guaranteed. And so I would prefer to be trying to solve the problem from that perspective than after having $772 billion in Medicaid funding taken out of the system, which then makes it almost impossible to solve the problem at all.
I appreciate that. Someone mentioned it earlier. It's easy to forget who gave us health care, but we will never forget who took it away. Before we go, you're a member of the Foreign Relations Committee. Can you help me on this? What was your reaction to President Trump's statement on Syria last night? It feels like it came out of nowhere.
Well, again, the president continues to engage in his very unfortunate habit of trying to tweet out foreign policy. It's not a good way to do business. He is, in that tweet, threatening President Assad. If the president
It was actually a statement, sir. It was a statement from the press secretary, so it wasn't President Trump and a late-night Yahoo on his smartphone. The White House made a decision to put that statement out.
Well, then the president, I think, has a responsibility to make sure that there is a full explanation of what his goals in Syria would be. If he intends on getting us even deeper into that Syrian civil war, if his goal would be ultimately to depose Assad, then that is a debate which we should have on the floor of the United States Senate. And understand, there is no military solution to this problem. It has to be diplomatic. He has to go to the table with the Russians and Assad and all other parties in order to eliminate the chemical weapons, ensure that there is humanitarian safe zones inside of that country, and that there is a de-escalation that leads ultimately to diplomatic political solution. Otherwise, this conflict is going to continue indefinitely. And I just wish that the president appreciated the fact that while he's saying that he might intervene once again as a humanitarian gesture, that simultaneously he's rejoicing in his Supreme Court victory to keep Syrian refugees out of our country, the very same people that he says that he is most concerned about.
Congressman, thank you so much. It is extraordinarily difficult. Senator, and can you believe I said Delaware earlier? Nobody's got a better Boston accent than you do. It's pretty good.
Well, I will say this, that Delaware and Massachusetts did partner in creating the United States of America. So Delaware was our closest associate in accomplishing that goal, and Chris Coons is a very good friend of mine, and I'm proud to be associated with him. So thank you.
And a good guy. All right, thank you so much. I appreciate your time this morning.